There is a huge problem in America in terms of overspending in a lot of different areas, which could lead you to live paycheck to paycheck and causes a lot of financial stress and anxiety overall. And I have personally applied and gotten approved for over 15 different credit cards. So a lot of times when people hear that, they think that I must be overspending, in debt, or overall just super careless with my finances. But I would actually consider myself to be a financial minimalist, and there are 10.5 things that I stopped buying which have allowed me to make and save more money and overall just decreased a lot of financial stress in my life. The first thing that I stopped buying is too much food. For the first couple months after we got married in July 2023, we didn't really have any plan whatsoever whenever we would go to the grocery store. We would go to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods and we didn't have a list or anything like that. We would basically just go through the aisles and put anything that looked good into our grocery cart. Sometimes we would even show up hungry, and as you can imagine, our grocery bills would just add up with things that we didn't even really need. So this switch that we made is that, first of all, it doesn't make that much sense for our own situation to be always just shopping at Whole Foods. So we'll go to Whole Foods for some specific items, but most of the time we shop at Trader Joe's or Fred Meyer, which first of all cut down our bill pretty significantly. Additionally, we're just a lot more strategic in terms of talking through our dinner plans for the week and making sure that we're only getting specific items that we know we need. Usually what this ends up meaning is that we'll just get a couple proteins that we can utilize for different dinners throughout the week, and then we'll also think of specific items that we can get for breakfast and lunches as well. I'm also someone who loves snacks, but we've cut down in this category a lot as well, because we've learned that a lot of food just goes to waste when we just buy every type of snack that looks good. The second thing that I stopped spending money on is tipping. Now, I wanted to provide the caveat, yes, I do tip when I have good service at a restaurant, and I totally respect the hard work of a lot of waiters and waitresses that are out there. So I definitely do think that you should be tipping well when you have good service at a restaurant as well. But at the same time, tipping culture is pretty out of control in America, because things that you used to not tip for at all, you do need to now leave a tip for. And then things that used to just be like a 10% tip are now like a 25% tip. As an example, 25% is like the least I can tip for a quick subway run now. And things like getting takeout food or getting a coffee to go, which used to be things that probably didn't require a tip, are now fully expecting one. Sometimes a minimum 25% tip or just a really high tip percentage is just unrealistic based on the amount of service that you got. So one thing that I've started to do, which has saved me a lot of money in the long run, is that when they turn that kiosk over to you and you see the different tip options for like 25% or 30%, what I'll do is I'll instead select the custom tip option and select a much more appropriate tip for something like a coffee run. And I'm also not afraid to tip really low, even if I'm at a restaurant, but maybe the service was just really not very good. The waiter or waitress just didn't pay attention to me at all, and it just doesn't feel like I should be tipping a really hefty amount of money. My viewpoint is that a specific tip is not fully guaranteed the minute that you step down, but instead you're tipping based off of the service that you received. So I have no problem leaving an excellent tip if I had amazing service, but also vice versa if the service wasn't very good. The next thing that I stopped paying for is expensive flights or hotels. Just because I stopped paying for expensive flights or hotels does not mean that I never travel or that I never stay at a nicer hotel or fly on an international trip with a more expensive flight. But the distinction is I will only do those things in terms of luxury travel when I have the credit card points that can offset those major expenses. I'm super fortunate to be able to go on 1 to 2 major trips per year and offset all of those major expenses, and still at the same time be able to fly in business class or stay at luxury hotels. And it's all because of credit card points. The thing is though, the credit card points hobby is a lot more accessible than you might think. And yeah, it does take some time to get the learning and education to understand how to build up your credit card setup, and then also build out points across different ecosystems that you can utilize for free travel. But the thing is, you don't have to be super smart. You don't have to have a lot of money. You just have to have the willingness to put in the work to learn. And then you can have a lot of those amazing travel experiences, including some of those luxury ones that a lot of people typically pay a lot of cash for, and you can get those for free by utilizing your credit card points. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're being responsible, because credit cards can be a huge asset, but they can also be a liability if you use them the wrong way. So make sure to check out my channel if you want to learn a little bit more about how to build out your credit card strategies. most of my videos are focused on credit cards. So I have a lot of videos on my channel that you can probably learn from. The fourth thing that I stopped buying is cheap items. I used to think that I was outsmarting people by buying cheap items because in my mind, it felt like I was saving a bunch of money. This can apply to clothing, appliances, and pretty much anything. Across the board, I was always looking for the best deal or the cheapest item that could get the job done without breaking the bank. The problem is these things then fall apart and cause you to continue to need to come back to buy new ones. In terms of clothing and shoes, I now understand the importance of paying for durability and quality, because even if I'm paying a little bit more for each pair of clothing or each pair of shoes, I know that those can then last longer and make more sense long term. I'm still never going to be someone who pays for really expensive name brand designer clothing, but I will pay for Nike clothes for athletic wear, nicer slacks and jeans, and even these cut shirts that I've been starting to wear and buy a lot more of that I got the idea from Daniel Braun, so shout out to you. In addition to clothes, I've also stopped buying cheap items when it comes to appliances and things around the house as well. So we've invested in a nicer espresso machine and a nicer vacuum and other kitchen related appliances, which are going to be way more durable and last us a way longer time. Okay, really quick, before I get into the next thing that I stopped buying, if you've been enjoying this video so far, then do me a huge favor and hit that like button and subscribe down below, because I do plan to come out with more personal finance related videos just like this one in the future. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on that future content. The next thing that I don't pay for and don't plan to ever pay for is any significant car payment. Car payments and transportation type expenses are usually some of the biggest expenses that we have in America in addition to housing. When it comes to saving money and budgeting, I think it's really important to understand the significance of the 80-20 rule, which basically means that 80% of the total dollar cost of our expenses only comes from 20% of our expenses. In reality, this might even be like the 90-10 rule for some of you, but the concept is the same. If we want to focus on improving and saving money, then we need to focus on those top expenses that are taking the bulk of our money. This is a big distinction that I've made because I used to think that going out and getting a $5 coffee while I got some work done at a coffee shop was a bad thing, just because it was technically unnecessary expenses that I didn't have to make. If you take it literally, then yeah, I guess it technically is unnecessary, but I do enjoy going to a coffee shop and working on this YouTube channel every now and then. And in reality, a $5 coffee is not going to make a huge difference over the long term. But what will actually make a dent in your savings plan is going to be something like a car payment. I've seen plenty of people, even people that I know personally, that are paying thousands of dollars for a car payment every single month, which is taking away so much money that they could have otherwise saved or invested. I personally am still driving a Toyota Corolla with almost 200,000 miles on it, and I plan to continue doing so as long as I can. I would love to upgrade my car at some point, but what I won't do is get a car that's outside of my financial means. So whatever car that I ultimately decide to get is definitely going to be a car that's within my financial means and I can minimize any sort of continuous payment or interest for. The sixth thing that I don't pay for is any sort of credit card fees. According to an article on Bankrate, half of Americans who have credit cards now have credit card debt, with a lot of them having zero plan to actually pay them off. This one really hits home for me because my channel is primarily focused on helping you build smart credit card strategies, but the last thing that I would want is for you to take that and get out of control with it and start acting irresponsibly and get into credit card debt. In reality, credit cards must be treated like debit cards where you're only spending on them to what you reasonably can. So the only sort of credit card associated fee that I'm going to pay is going to be annual fees on credit cards where I'm getting enough value on to offset those fees every year. But I will never pay any sort of credit card fees that are associated with interest fees, late fees, or anything like that. The seventh thing that I don't pay for is razors. Now, when I say this, it doesn't mean that I don't take care of myself. I never shave ever, and I just walk around with a big bushy beard, because as you can tell, I don't. But what I do instead is use an electric razor, which technically costs more than like an individual regular razor. But what I've been able to do is, instead of having to replace razors all the time, there's just a couple parts that I've had to replace over the past couple of years. But outside of that, it's worked perfectly fine to use it for multiple years. If you really think about it, buying individual razors, shaving cream, and all of those accessories from the store all of the time can really add up to a lot of money over time if they're really bad quality and you have to continue to replace them. Sometimes this is more of just a personal preference, which I do understand, but to be honest, I've tried using both, so just like regular razors from the store and an electric razor, and honestly, I think the electric razor is just way better from a comfortability standpoint as well. An electric razor also follows the same concept that I use for most of my purchases, so it's going to be more durable and last longer over time versus the cost-cutting, cheaper alternative to buy the lower quality razors from the store. The eighth thing that I stopped paying for is more than one streaming service. These days, cord cutting has become increasingly popular, with so many streaming services available that you don't really need cable TV, and myself and Lucia do not pay for cable TV either. But the problem is there's so many different streaming services that are out there that sometimes it can be overwhelming, and sometimes some can get lost in the shuffle where you end up paying for a lot of different ones, and maybe there's certain shows that you want to watch with each streaming service, but then all of a sudden you're paying for some streaming services that you aren't even using regularly. So to break this down more, first of all, sometimes you don't even know what streaming services that you are paying for, and you might be paying for some that you don't really use at all. So in that case, it's really important to make sure that you're budgeting and you're understanding where your money is coming from so that you can identify some of those root causes and problems of streaming services that you're not really using. And then next, one strategy that I found to be pretty effective is to just watch one show at a time. So you pick one show that you want to watch and then get that streaming service that's associated with that show, watch that entire show, finish it, and then cancel that streaming service and then move on to the next one. We caught the wave pretty late with this one, but as an example, over the past year, we started watching Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso was on Apple TV. So what we did is we paused or canceled all of our other streaming services. We got Apple TV for a month, watched Ted Lasso, and then when we were done watching Ted Lasso, we simply canceled Apple TV. During football season, I like to get Hulu Live Sports plus NFL Red Zone. So then we'll watch any shows that are on Hulu in addition to live sports with Hulu as well. In general, I think it's just much easier than you might think to be more lean with your streaming services in terms of focusing on specific ones, instead of being more bloated where you have a bunch of different streaming services and you don't even know if you're using all of them. The ninth thing that I stopped buying is the newest tech item. Obviously, companies like Apple like to make their newest tech items seem super exciting, and their marketing makes you feel like you absolutely have to have it. But in my opinion, that newest tech item is usually not groundbreaking, and it's usually not worth the additional cost versus just getting the lower version of that item. For me, I'm usually the person in the friend group who has the oldest generation phone, and a lot of times I like to play a game with myself on how long that particular phone can last. Obviously, you don't have to take it as extreme as I do, but a lot of times it's usually worth it to just get a couple generations back for a new phone or new tech item or whatever it is, just because you're typically getting basically the same thing, just for a much discounted price. As an example, I've been getting a lot more into running recently, and so I've wanted to invest into an Apple Watch, and I haven't done so yet, but my plan is to get an Apple Watch that's a couple generations back instead of the new ones because I just need it for a specific purpose. I don't need to have like the newest glossy, best expensive item. Finally, the last thing that I stopped paying for is parking. This is my point 5 and why this list is 10.5 things that I stopped paying for. Because yes, I do understand that sometimes I still have to pay for parking, but I do think I've built some strategies where I basically slashed that in half. Midway through this year in 2024, I moved to the city of Seattle where parking is really expensive, so I try to avoid paying for parking as much as I can. Now that I am living in the city of Seattle, there's endless things to do or restaurants to try, so I do acknowledge that sometimes paying for parking is just completely unavoidable. But like I said, I do think that I've slashed my parking expenses basically in half, and here's how I've been able to do so. Both my wife Lucia and I are currently hybrid in our jobs, so we work in person in the office 3 days a week, and so we take the bus every day that we need to go in the office. I get a free bus pass from my work, and then Lucia pays about $2 each way to take the bus, which is drastically different from the $40 per day that we would likely pay if both of us had to drive to work and then pay for parking in Seattle. I do love going to Seattle sports games, and we also go into the city to go to some concerts and events like that as well. And so same thing, we take public transportation whenever we can. And then for things like Seahawks or Mariners games, you can usually get free street parking if you park far enough away, versus it's like $50 to park anywhere close to the stadiums. And if I'm being honest, I kind of like the walk, so it's definitely worth it to just get to the game early, park pretty far away, and then walk to the stadium but get free parking instead of paying like $50. All of these things together have allowed me to save a significant amount of money, and I really hope that you can implement some of the things that I talked about in this video as well. But after watching this video, go watch this other video where I ranked every single one of the credit cards that I currently have. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Peace.